In the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful, the Creator and the Sustainer of the universe, peace and blessings upon His servant and messenger Muhammad forever. Ameen. I bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship except the one true God, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger and servant of God. I greet you with my usual greeting. This is a greeting that has been used by all of the prophets from Abraham through to Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon them all. It's the universal greetings of peace, Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be unto you. I'm your host, Hamid Rashid. Today we have our 26th program in our series dealing with the social system of Islam, and we'll be continuing our discussion on engagement. I have joining me as usual Dr. Jamal Badawi of St. Mary's University. Brother Jamal, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
As is also our fashion, could I ask you to quickly highlight and summarize the main points that we touched on in our program last week when we began our discussion on engagement?
Surely. There were 5 basic points, I suppose. One is to clarify some of the basic aims or objectives of marriage in Islam, and we indicated that marriage is not regarded in Islam as inevitable evil, nor is it connected with so-called original sin, because there is no such thing in Islam. We quoted from chapter 30 in the Quran that marriage really is a blessing from God. It's a bounty that God has provided. A second major point was the discussion of the criteria for selection of future spouses. And we quoted again the saying and advice of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that one should not seek an spouse simply because of wealth, beauty, or nobility of the family, but rather on the basis of religiosity and character of the individual. And in the case of selecting a future wife, to choose also the one who is fertile and one who is wadud, which I translated as loving and lovable type of woman or girl. A third is that the same applications or the same criteria apply also in the woman selecting her future husband. And we quoted again the sayings or the advice that she should be married only to a person with good character, so that if he loves her, he would be generous and considerate to her. If he doesn't love her, at least he would not be unjust in his treatment of her. The fourth point was that a woman also in Islam is permitted to engage a man or to seek marriage to a man, even though usually it's the other way around, but there is no prohibition on that. And finally, that there is no objection in Islamic law that the people engage to each other, would see each other and talk to each other, provided, of course, that there are certain requirements of modesty in dress and behavior, and that they should not be totally secluded or in total privacy.
Well, now, is there any particular reasons behind the precautions that you've just referred to?
Yes. Well, to start with, engagement is like a first step in marriage, but it's not marriage in itself. It is only a promise for marriage. It's not necessarily marriage. And as such, there is a possibility that things may not go through. Marriage may not necessarily materialize as a result of this relationship. And if the couples, in Islamic perspective, are allowed to go in total privacy, apartments, whatever, then there may be some question about the reputation of either or both sides, because things, some people may say, may have happened in this total privacy away from everybody else. And that might jeopardize the opportunities for marriage to other people, especially in a community or society where chastity is regarded as very essential part of the moral behavior. The other thing also is that this is more even of a protection for the female side even, because it's quite possible that some people who might be unscrupulous may exploit the dreams of a girl to get married, might hide behind this engagement and promise to get married until they achieve whatever need they may have in mind, and then abandon the girl. Of course, this would be quite harmful to her reputation. In some cases, they might be even pregnancy as a result of this relationship. But I think we should remember also two things. First of all, that in general, in Islam, as was indicated under moral teaching, even in cases where there is no engagement, the man and woman in Islam are not supposed to be in total privacy. Those who are not legitimate unto each other should not be alone, away from everyone else. And this is a matter of moral teaching and protection. As Prophet Muhammad indicated, as narrated in Ahmad, he says that let no man be in total privacy with a woman. He means a woman who is not lawful unto him, because if they do, Satan will be their third. I can imagine what happens, of course, when people are totally alone. There is a possibility. It's just a kind of safeguard. But of course, it should be emphasized also that these precautions does not mean that the future couple, or hopefully future couples, should not meet. They are allowed to meet, discuss their future plans, but there should be at least somebody present. They should not be totally secluded.
Well, now, is it permissible for one to see one's fiancé without them being knowledgeable of it?
Well, if there is a clear necessity for that, there is nothing wrong with that. One of the companions of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, by the name is Jabir ibn Abdullah. After he got married, he used to narrate that he used to hide to watch his fiancée, his wife, the future wife. Of course, provided that he's not camped permanently under the tree watching all girls coming. I mean, there's the necessity to just try to discover the character of the individual, or, what does she really, or who's she like. The same thing, I suppose, would apply to a woman also. She may hide wherever she wants and just watch the person that hopefully will be her future husband. If there's a need for that, I think there's nothing wrong.
Well, now, in the case of engagement, are there any formal procedures that need to be followed or that are suggested, recommended?
Well, in Islam, there is no particular formalities that must be followed. It's basically an informal type of procedure, because, as indicated before, it's mainly a promise for marriage or just a preliminary approach. But in most customary, the person would go to the girl's father or legal guardian, whoever he or she may be, and simply seek the hand of the girl. While there is nothing particular required, some people prefer, but that's not a must, to have a little party where it serves as a kind of announcement, really.
Yes.
Or offering some kind of a gift to symbolize a sort of rapprochement with the family. So there's nothing wrong with using this, but there is no must for it. It could be even a direct approach in some cases to the individual himself or herself.
Well, now, what about the situation where a person decides to give a gift to announce or to signify the engagement, but then it happens that the engagement is broken? Would the gift be returned?
Well, you see, in Islam, the equivalent of gift called hiba has certain rules in Sharia, but there are two types of gifts. There are gifts which are given expecting no return whatsoever, just by way of like donation. Like if you give something to a poor person, for example, and say, all right, this is just like a donation or gift. The rule for this type of gift that you should not go back on it. And there are certain sayings of the Prophet that you shouldn't go back on a gift, but he meant this type of gift. But the second type of gift also is the type of gift which is given in return for something or in expectation of something. And obviously a gift given by a fiancé is a gift which is conditional, more or less, at least understood to be related or conditional to the fulfillment of the total procedure that is getting married to the person. For that reason, we find that Muslim jurists, for long have addressed this particular question as to what happens if the engagement is broken. And here we have two situations. Either that the engagement is broken on the behest of the female side, that's wife-to-be, or the male side. If the engagement is broken by the woman's side, because she's the one usually who received the gift, then the jurists agree that he is entitled for the return back of the gifts. If those gifts are still available, like for example if he gives her a golden ring or something like that, or a bracelet, then he's entitled to get it back. If the thing that he gave by way of gift is either used up or sold or whatever, even though it's not very usual, of course, to sell a gift, but if it's not available, then he would be entitled for a compensation equivalent to the price of that gift. That's one case. If, however, the breaking of the engagement came from the male side, that is from the man's side, there are two opinions among Muslim jurists. Some jurists, like the Maliki jurist, for example, say that he is not entitled, even if he goes back, he's not entitled to anything, whether the gift as he gave or the equivalent value. But some other jurists, like the Hanafi jurists, feel that he is entitled to get back his gift if it is present, the same gift. But he would not be entitled to get it back if it has been used up or, consumed. So basically, the return of the gift in most cases would be permissible.
Now, this is also true if the woman gave a gift to the fiancé and the engagement was broken. The same thing applies.
Yeah, the same thing applies equally to a female. The main reason I focused on the male giving the gift is simply because this is usually the customary practice, not only among Muslims, I suppose, in many other cultures also, that the male seeking the hand of the girl usually is the one who, I know there are exceptions to that, but otherwise the rule applies equally to male or female, the same basic rule.
Well, now, in addition to the gifts that may or may not be given, are there any other additional financial liability that comes about as a result of one becoming engaged?
Well, the basic rule in Islamic jurisprudence is that there is no additional compensation. The reason, of course, being is that engagement is simply a promise to get married. The obligation is largely really a moral type of obligation, and the person really should not go back on it unless he or she discovers something which is quite essential that should not.
Okay. Well, now we've talked about the possibility of giving gifts and so on.
Yeah. But maybe I should add one thing.
Yes, all right.
Well, because there is some additional contemporary problems that might have not risen in the past, which could arise today, and this even some contemporary Muslim jurists try to address. What happened, for example, in the case of a fiancé who tells his wife-to-be that I would like for you, for example, to resign from your job because, I'd like for you to give full time and attention to your household. We'd like to get children. And she agrees to that. And she resigns from her job. And then after a while, he breaks the engagement. Well, this is a case that was not addressed by early jurists, but within the boundaries of Islamic law, using the same principles in Islamic law, some contemporary jurists like Dr. Sabuni, for example, said that in that case, if there is certainty that there is harm, for example, she resigned from the job, after he broke the engagement, she tried to get back her job and she couldn't. And he feels that in this case, the woman is entitled to some compensation.
Yes.
As far as determining the amount, he suggested that this would be equivalent to 1/2 of the marriage gift or mahr. That's the amount that should be paid at the time of nuptial contract, whether it was specified or the customary mahr or marriage gift for a woman of her level or social status. So even that problem is not totally left out. There is a possibility. The general rule, of course, is no, but if there is clear harm, because there is a rule in Sharia that says one should not harm himself or others, and in some cases a compensation could be called for.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, are there any other basic rules to observe in engagement?
There are a number of things also that should be kept in mind. For example, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as quoted in both Muslim and Ahmad, he said that one should not engage a woman who is already engaged to someone else. لا يخطب على خطبة أخيه. The reason, of course, is quite obvious. That first of all, there is a social courtesy. I mean, if a man has already engaged a woman, no other person should just, intervene at this time when they're still discussing and there's some preliminary agreement between them. So it is a courtesy. It is a matter also that would help to prevent disputes and bad feeling between individuals or between families involved, that somebody just is trying to snatch the other fellow. I would say that the same thing also applies to the woman, even though the hadith or the saying of the Prophet speaks about the man, but in every respect there's no reason to believe that this will not apply to the female side. That a woman, if she is initiating engagement of a man, she should not engage a man who's already engaged by another woman. In addition to this, a Muslim also should not engage a woman who is going through a waiting period.
Yes. By
that we mean a woman, for example, who is divorced, a revocable divorce. She has to wait for normally 3 months. We'll be talking about that later when we get to the rules on divorce. But for the 3 months following her divorce, she's not supposed to get married. By the same token, it's not appropriate for a person to try to engage a woman during this immediate period following divorce. Not only would that be a kind of discourtesy, but it could also mean that you're blocking the way for reconciliation, because in Islam, during this 3-month waiting period, there is an ample opportunity for reconciliation. Yes. And she may go back to her husband, or her husband, agree that they would resume their marital relationships. A similar situation is the case of a woman whose husband recently died, a widow. Again, according to the Quran, she should wait for 130 days before she can get married. So a person, again, should not openly engage such a woman. However, in this case, that's the case of a widow, as well as the case of a woman who is divorced irrevocably, that's the third time. Jurists also agreed that there could be an engagement, but not openly. They call it ta'arid, which means just like giving or dropping a hint of some interest, but waiting until the waiting period finishes. Only in these two cases, not in the case of a revocable divorce. How? Well, a person can use his own imagination, like, for example, telling the woman that he's interested in, a widow, for example, that, well, I am really hoping that I'll be able to get married soon, or I am praying to God to give me a pious wife like yourself. Something of that sort, just a kind of hint without necessarily saying, I'd like to engage you. So in these particular cases, some kind of hint could also be permissible. In addition to this, of course, there are other things that one should keep in mind in engagement. One is to observe some basic need for compatibility. And secondly, one should also not engage a woman who is illegitimate unto him. There are certain categories in Islam that a person is not supposed to get married to. These are additional.
Well, now, on this point of compatibility, could you explain to us the importance of compatibility and its effects on the selection of a spouse?
Well, there is a text in one of the saying of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that a woman should only be married to a person who is good enough for her or compatible to her. In interpreting or explaining, however, what compatibility means, there have been different opinions by jurists. Some jurists went into some greater detail, just applying their own judgment, to include as some of the conditions of compatibility things like similarity in financial status, similarity in social status. Some even talk about similarity in profession or type of education and all that. However, it would appear to me that these are their opinion, of course. It's not necessarily a text in the word of the prophetic tradition. But my understanding is that a better interpretation and opinion given by many jurists is that compatibility simply means that you try to make sure that there is a reasonable chance of success in marriage between the two individuals involved. And as you know, success in marriage is not contingent on financial status or social status or any other factor. I mean, this might be a contributing forces, but it's not really a precondition for the success of marriage. So they ended up saying that a believer, a Muslim, is compatible with any other Muslim. You know, so that itself is the what is meant by compatibility. And they give some reasons for that. There are a number of documentations that could be given. First of all, in chapter 49 in the Quran, a short chapter called Al-Hujurat, it says that believers are but one brotherhood. And it says simply believers, rich, poor, whatever, they're all one single brotherhood. In the very same chapter also, it says the noblest of you in the sight of God is he who is more God-conscious, the more pious, which again removes any barrier but the distinction on the basis of piety of the individual. And as such, all these aristocratic approaches or attitudes that, you know, a princess cannot marry a commoner and all this has no relevance as far as the Quran is concerned. The other evidence is found in the saying of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which I think reference to that was made in a previous program in this series, when the Prophet says that if a person comes to you and you accept and you're satisfied with his religiosity and character, then give him whatever, daughters or sisters, if you're marrying your sister or whatever, in marriage. Because if you don't do it, there would be big commotions and corruption on earth. And in that saying of the Prophet, which by the way was narrated in At-Tirmidhi, he did not mention anything about social or financial status, just the person who is good in terms of character. The Quran also supports that in chapter 2 in the Quran, particularly verse 221. It says that a slave girl who's a believer is better than one who's an atheist or pagan or unbeliever, which again opened the door wide for even a good, pious, former or present even slave girl would be a better wife than an unbeliever. So that gives the emphasis again on faith. In addition to this, we find that in the own behavior of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that he encouraged and agreed and consented to marriages which were like marriages between a free person and quote-unquote someone who's under bondage or slavery, or between a person who was a former slave and a woman, for example, who was a noble woman in Quraysh, like the case of Zayd and Zainab, who was a relative of the Prophet. He was a former slave, and still he even encouraged their marriage. So looking at all these points together, it would appear that the main reconcilability really would be piety. However, I should add also, in the interest of balance, that even if this is taken as the fundamental basis for assessing the individual male or female for marriage, it does not mean, however, that one should totally ignore things that may threaten the stability of marriage, not wealth or social status. An example of that, if a man, for example, who's 70 years old is married to a 20 years old girl, for example, there's a problem of compatibility. Islam does not say that the age must be exactly within so many years, but I mean, if there's a big gap like that, it may not necessarily be a very successful marriage. Or in some cases, if there is a big gap in educational level which would prevent some kind of rapport and communication, if in that particular case there is risk that marriage will not succeed, then one should also try to look into this as an additional factor. But in any case, those compatibility question sometimes is subject also to customary practices in different places, provided it's not just a matter of aristocracy, just the stability of marriage.
Well, now, you mentioned earlier that a person should not become engaged to a woman who is not lawful for him to marry. Could you give us some idea of or explain what exactly is meant by those people who are not lawful to be engaged to?
Okay. Before I do that, I'd just like to make a remark that whatever I'm going to clarify on this issue applies equally to male and female.
Yes.
But I'm just assuming now that the male is the one who's seeking marriage, but the same rule applies, just to avoid being too cumbersome and repeating.
Right.
For example, if we say that in Islam a man could not get married to his sister, so the same thing applies. A sister could not get married to her brother. But basically there are two major categories of prohibitions. One is the category of people who are prohibited for marriage to the individual on a permanent basis. That's forever. And another category of those who are prohibited on a temporary basis, that if the conditions change, they may be lawful for him to marry. Let me address first the permanent prohibition, or mahrims. First of all, among this group there are three subcategories. There are those who are prohibited from for the individual to get married to because of, one, the lineage relationship. And this includes four basic categories. Ancestors. One cannot get married, for example, to his mother or grandmother. Secondly, one cannot marry to his descendants. One cannot get not married to his daughter or her daughter, granddaughter, for example. Thirdly, one cannot get married to the branches of his parents, like sisters, for example, whether she's a full sister or half-sister. Fourthly, one cannot get married to the branches of his grandparents, which means his aunts, for example, either from mother's side or from the father's side. These four categories would be prohibited. This is one. Secondly, there are those who are unlawful because of marital relationship. For example, a person in Islam cannot get married to his mother-in-law, cannot get married to his stepdaughter, cannot also get married to a woman who was married previously to his father, widowed or divorcee of his father. Nor can he get married to a widow or divorcee of his son. That's the second. A third category is the case of the suckling, prohibition because of suckling. In some societies it is customary for a woman to give her child to another woman to suckle. That woman in Islam who suckles a baby, even though it's not her own baby, she is regarded just like a mother. So the person, when he grows up, he cannot get married to her, nor can he get married to any other girl who suckled from the same mother. And not only the mother and daughter, but like the Prophet says, anything that's prohibited because of lineage is also prohibited because of suckling. So he cannot get married to the mother who suckled him, the sister by suckling, or to the aunt of his suckling mother, the same thing as lineage. As far as the temporary prohibitions, it includes categories such as a woman who does not believe in any revealed religion, for example, until she becomes a believer. A woman who is in the waiting period, but because after the waiting period a person could engage her and get married to her. And there might be some other categories that might arise in the context of discussion of some of other particulars of family law in Islam.
Well, let's leave it at that for today because our time, I believe, is gone. We want to thank you for being our guest. Thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be on you.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.